Welcome to World Talk Brief. Today, we're deconstructing Iran's national defense strategy. You know, it's often talked about as a kind of fortress, and in this explainer, we're going to peel back those layers, one by one, to really understand what that means.
So here's how we're going to break it down. We'll look at 5 distinct layers. First, the natural geography of the country itself. Then, the historical lessons that shaped its entire military mindset. We'll dive into its core mosaic defense doctrine, look at its unique asymmetrical toolkit, and finally explore its strategy of forward defense to keep threats far from home.
All right, so the very first layer of Iran's defense. It's not a weapon, it's not some high-tech policy, it's the land itself. Iran's geography is the absolute bedrock of its entire military strategy.
You see, long before any army or grand strategy, there were just mountains and deserts. For literally centuries, these natural barriers have dictated the course of any invasion and have really fostered this deeply defensive national mindset.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Strategic analysts call this a fortress within a fortress. Just look at it. You've got the massive Zagros Mountains in the west, which make any ground invasion from, say, Iraq a total logistical nightmare. Up north, the Alborz Mountains act as a shield for the capital, Tehran. And even if an enemy somehow breaches those, what do they face next? Vast, uninhabitable salt and sand deserts that just eat armies and supply lines for breakfast.
Okay, so if geography is the foundation, what's the blueprint? Well, that was forged in fire. The second layer is the historical and psychological framework that was built during the brutal 8-year war with Iraq. In Iran, they call it the sacred defense, and the lessons from that war are seared into the nation's military doctrine.
And this quote from a prominent historian with the Revolutionary Guard, it really reveals a critical piece of the puzzle. This deep-seated belief that the Iran-Iraq war wasn't just some regional squabble, but was actually a proxy war waged by global superpowers. And that worldview is absolutely foundational to how they see the world today.
So, what did they learn from this devastating conflict? Well, it really boils down to a few core lessons that became pillars of their modern defense. First, a deep, profound distrust of international bodies like the UN. Second, an obsession with military self-reliance, the idea that you can't count on anyone but yourself. And third, this core belief that unconventional, asymmetric tactics are the key to survival. These lessons are practically carved into their strategic DNA.
This brings us to the third layer, the actual walls of the fortress. It's a doctrine called mosaic defense, and it was developed by watching U.S. military interventions in Afghanistan and Iraq very, very closely. The whole point is to make sure that what happened in Baghdad back in 2003 could never, ever happen in Tehran.
So the goal of mosaic defense isn't to win some conventional battle at the border. No. It's to make the cost of occupation unbearably high. It's a strategy of pure attrition, designed to bleed an invading force dry by turning the entire country into one giant logistical and military quagmire. So how does this actually play out? Let's walk through it. Step 1. The conventional army, the Artesh, engages the enemy to slow them down. Step 2. That invading force is deliberately lured deeper and deeper into Iran's unforgiving terrain. Step 3. The Revolutionary Guard and its Basij militia launch a nationwide guerrilla war, hitting flanks, supply lines, everything. And finally, and this is so critical, the command structure itself shatters into over 30 autonomous provincial commands. That means even if Tehran falls, the resistance just keeps going, with each piece of the mosaic fighting on its own.
Now, this whole system relies on something pretty unique, a dual military structure. You have the Artesh, which is your traditional army defending the borders. But then you have the IRGC, the ideological guardians of the revolution. They handle internal security, asymmetric warfare, and all of Iran's strategic weapons. Now, while they complement each other, this structure also creates its own friction and some really complex command challenges, which, is a key vulnerability an adversary would definitely try to exploit.
Okay, but that leads to a pretty obvious question, right? If your conventional forces are outmatched, if you're working with aging equipment, how do you realistically stop an attack from happening in the first place? How do you even the odds?
Well, the answer lies in the fourth layer, the armory. Iran has poured resources into a toolkit of what we call asymmetric weapons. Think of these as the great equalizers, designed to bypass conventional military strength and hit an enemy where they're most vulnerable.
And at the very heart of this toolkit is the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the entire Middle East.
We're talking an estimated inventory of over 3,000 missiles. This isn't just a weapon. It's the absolute centerpiece of their deterrent strategy.
And make no mistake, this was a conscious, strategic choice. As a former IRGC commander put it, they looked at their weaknesses, like an old Air Force, and they deliberately chose to invest in missiles and drones as a much more effective way to project power and deter much stronger adversaries.
This is the core concept of asymmetric warfare, and it's the strategic thread that connects everything from their missiles to their drones to their naval tactics. The philosophy is really simple. Don't play to your enemy's strengths. Instead, create new battlefields where you can exploit their weaknesses and magnify your own advantages.
Their naval tactics are a perfect example of this evolution. Back in the 80s, Iran used what was called mass swarming, just sending hundreds of small boats all at once. It turned out to be really vulnerable, so they evolved. Today, the doctrine is dispersed swarming. Small, agile attack boats hide all along a vast coastline, popping out from countless locations to strike. It is a far more lethal and survivable tactic.
Okay, so defending the homeland is one thing, but the best defense, right, is stopping the fight from ever reaching you in the first place. So how does Iran do that?
And that's where we find the fifth and final layer of this fortress, the outer perimeter. This is a proactive strategy they call forward defense, and its whole purpose is to create a massive buffer zone and engage with adversaries far away from Iran itself.
The strategy is basically to push the fortress walls way out. You intercept threats in open waters, or you fight proxy battles in other countries, essentially extending your defenses hundreds, even thousands of kilometers beyond your physical territory.
Now, the primary tool for this is the axis of resistance, a network of allied and proxy groups spread across the region. This gives Iran the powerful capability of what's called horizontal escalation. In simple terms, it means an attack on Iran might trigger a response from Lebanon, from Yemen, from Iraq, from Syria, all at the same time. It turns a direct conflict into a chaotic, multi-front regional war.
When you boil it all down, the ultimate goal of forward defense is incredibly simple. Make sure that if a war is going to be fought, it's fought over there, not at home. Iran's strategy isn't static. It has constantly evolved to meet new threats. The Iran-Iraq War in the 80s forged its belief in asymmetry. The Gulf War in the 90s led to them hardening key sites against air power. The U.S. invasions of the 2000s gave birth to the decentralized mosaic defense, and the last decade or so has really seen the maturation of this forward defense strategy.
So what's the ultimate takeaway here? The Iranian fortress, with all its complex layers, is not built to win a conventional war against the superpower. It is meticulously designed to deter one by making the potential military, economic, and political costs of an attack simply too high to even consider. Subscribe to World Talk Brief for more clear, thoughtful explanations. World Talk Brief, news explained without the noise.